Welcome to Mind and Soul Matters. I'm Farah Feeney. Through conversations with everyday people, Mind and Soul Matters aims to broaden our understanding of mental health and spirituality, and to deepen our insights into the challenges and meaning of our lives.
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
He was jailed unjustly for 27 years. He could have used his authority, his power, for retribution. He chose reconciliation.
We have all at some point been hurt by the actions or words of others, ranging from misunderstandings to intentional actions, leaving wounds and causing hurt, anger, and bitterness. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for nearly 3 decades. When he was finally released in 1990, he refused to hold on to anger or resentment, saying, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." Forgiveness liberates the soul. So how do we reach forgiveness and free ourselves from the prison of resentment and anger? Dr. Laura Hedayati, a clinical psychologist with a PhD and many years of experience working with children, adolescents, adults, and families, joins us today to talk about the role of forgiveness in healing. I am looking forward to talking to Laura about her approach to helping people move from a negative and burdensome state to a higher and more joyful state, and the role of forgiveness in healing and well-being. Welcome, Laura, to Mind and Soul Matters.
Thank you, Farah.
Forgiveness is often spoken about in the world's great religions and spiritual teachings. For example, the Baha'i writings state, "If one of you has been wounded in the heart by the words or deeds of another, forgive him now, that you may feast in happiness and arise renewed in spirit." Interestingly, science has begun to study and document the impact of forgiveness. So why is forgiveness so important?
I think, as those beautiful words from the high writings allude to, it liberates us. It sets us free, and it creates a peace. And we know that there are biological, there are psychological, and spiritual benefits to forgiveness. So when we harbour in our hearts anger and resentment and hurt and hostility, which are very negative emotions, they're not good for our health, and they undermine our well-being. And these negative emotions put our body under chronic stress. So, for example, it will increase our blood pressure, to increase our risk of cardiovascular disease, increase the incidence of digestive disorders, or lower our immune system, making us more prone to illness. So when we are constantly bathed in negative emotions, we're releasing stress hormones that lead to really damaging impacts on our body. So we're actually hurting our cells by bathing our body in negative emotions. And it's really interesting, if we look at the word psychology, and you and I are both psychologists, psychology comes from the Greek word psyche, which means spirit and soul. And so we can't, I feel, really do justice to what we do if we don't think about the mind, the body, and the spirit. And your podcast is called Mind and Soul Matters, so that kind of links those three together. And when we have a preoccupation with past hurts, it can create what's called an opportunity cost. So you think, well, we're so busy thinking of our grievances, we lose the opportunity to notice and to experience the wonder and the possibilities of now. So we see and focus in our lives on what we appreciate and we're grateful for, what we lose the ability to see what interests, what delights, what's intriguing us in the present and what inspires and makes us happy, because we're crowding our mind with hurt from the past. And we know that when we are happy, that happiness and joy have a profound impact on our well-being. So apart from feeling good, they do really good things for our brain and for our body. And research tells us that happiness actually, it has the inverse of all the things I talked about before. You know, it lowers our risk for cardiovascular disease. It lowers our blood pressure. It gives us better sleep. It lowers the stress hormones that are coursing through our body. It boosts our immune system. It can help to ease anxiety and depressions, and we might even live longer. So they're really powerful incentives to build more happiness and joy in our lives. And from the Baha'i writings, there's a beautiful quote by Abdu'l-Baha, one of the central figures of the Baha'i faith, about joy, which I often reflect on. And it says that joy gives us wings. In times of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, and our understanding less clouded. We seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness. And you can really see that. You can see just clinically when people come and they are really beset by troubles and worries and they're really sad, there's an energy. You know, you feel that heaviness, you see that heaviness. And when people are happy and they're joyful, there's an attraction. You know, there's a lightness. And so those energies, both positive and negative, can really be felt. We also know, and Abdu'l-Baha explains further from the Baha'i writings, that human happiness is founded upon spiritual behaviour. So what do I mean by spiritual behaviour? And I think it means that our behavioural choices are driven by the qualities of the human spirit, such as courage, optimism, mercy and forgiveness. And I think that's why it's so important that we actually have this understanding of the interrelatedness between the mind, the body, and the spirit, and the importance of the behavioural choices that we actually make. And while we know that to forgive is not easy, it is a choice. And it's an action that we actually can make. And it's a very purposeful. And I say this, and I know it's not easy, and I acknowledge it's not easy. I struggle with this just as much as everybody else is, but we have the ability where we decide and commit to shifting our thoughts away from past actions that caused pain. And Viktor Frankl, who's an Austrian psychiatrist who survived 3 years in a Nazi concentration camp, said, between the stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And I think this is a really powerful understanding for humanity, that we actually have the power of intellect and reason to decide how we want to be in the world and to commit daily, sometimes minute by minute, to that purpose that we feel, which is to, and again guided by the Baha'i writings, you know, the purpose for which we've come is actually to contribute to the betterment of the world, to live together in concord and harmony. So when we think about forgiveness, we think, well, forgiveness is really pillar to actually being able to have, one, the energy free to focus on being part of the positive, but also to have the desire to build harmony and concord. It's where we focus. And the more we dwell on a thought or a memory, either positive or negative, the stronger it becomes. So every time we revisit a thought in our mind, we actually strengthen it. So if we are mentally rehearsing over and over and over again events, actions that have happened in the past, we're actually consolidating that memory.
So what you're saying is that one of the ways we can let go and achieve forgiveness is to consciously make that choice and that is something that we actually have control over. And as you said earlier, this is easier said than done. Is there any specific strategies or steps or tips that you have in terms of how can we shift that thinking and how can we move from ruminating on the hurt or the anger or the resentment to moving towards that forgiveness?
I think it's very much about building different habits, because ruminating can become a bad habit. And I think one of the strategies that can be really helpful derives from mindfulness. So really begin to pay attention and focus on what's happening with us now and engage with our present in a more meaningful way. For example, really focus on the small joys around us. The smell of a flower, the taste of a beautiful meal, the call of a bird, the warmth of the sun. Because you can consciously do something and be very aware of everything you're doing. Say, for example, you're driving and you're very conscious of every aspect of driving to get from a destination of A to B. Or you can be in your mind and completely unconscious of how you're driving. You're completely, on memory. And if we spend that time ruminating on past hurts, we're consolidating that. But if we make a choice to be, I will be very present, I will be very conscious in every aspect of my now, over time we consolidate that, we strengthen that, and we feel better. We can also seek inspiration and comfort in prayer. And I think in reading writings that inspire, that delight, that give food to our soul, I think that's really important to feed us in that spiritual way as well. Like a walk on the beach can be people's soul food. Sitting in nature can be people's soul food. Doing something for someone else, when you add value to someone else's life, can be your soul food. Anything, I think, that is engaging in a positive, contributory way to the betterment of your relationships with others helps you to build that habit of positivity, because we know that all of us are going to face challenges and hurts in life. It's part of life. And I think our mindset to these struggles is really important to the behavioural choices that we make. And if we have a growth mindset as opposed to a more fixed mindset, and a fixed mindset is where we kind of approach life where our capacities, our skills, our reasoning powers are kind of stable and they're not going to change. So whatever challenges, if we're struggling with it, well, this is as good as it gets, because I don't have anything within extra to give because it's fixed. But if we approach it from a growth mindset, which is through effort, I can grow my reasoning capacities, I can grow my skills, I can grow my capacities, I can refine and hone, then it helps us to see challenge as opportunities to grow. And we can meet those challenges with more optimism and hope, knowing that these hardships are actually, they're more like a springboard for growth, for building capacity and refining abilities, rather than diminishing me, punishing me, lessening me. And so I think that's a very important aspect to be helping us to grow in the art of forgiveness. I also think something else that's really important is how we build within ourselves, but also, if we're lucky enough to be parents and caregivers, build within us the next generation, is to train ourselves to overlook mistakes and to focus on people's strengths and to look for the good in people, which I think is really important to build happiness, because this is not the realm of perfection. Every single one of us, either unintentionally, or we're having a bad day, or we're just not quite at the peak of our game, we will make mistakes, and somebody may get hurt by our mistakes. And so I think it's important that we train ourselves to look for the good. And in fact, from the Baha'i writings, it says that, and if a man has 10 bad qualities and one good one, to look at the one and forget the 10. So really to be training ourselves to ever seek out people's strengths. And I think following on from that is not to bathe ourselves in negativity. And regrettably, in our world at the moment, we do tend to dwell on mistakes and other people's challenges. And we can easily get engaged and sucked into, either as a bystander or participatory, gossip and backbiting, which further, I think, feeds into hurts, resentments, grievances, pain, that makes it harder to be forgiving, because we've got a fault-finding eye rather than, an fault-overlooking eye. And so I think when we think about what our purpose is, which I talked a little bit before, and all the world's religions and the spiritual traditions have talked about a purpose that's higher than self and self-interest, try to be guided by, we're here to contribute to the well-being of humanity, and that our life work is to build our character. And these building blocks of character are our spiritual qualities, and forgiveness is vital. It's one of them. Then with our focus is more on the building and the growth and how we improve our lives and the lives of others around us, rather than dwelling on past slights, injustices, and faults. And every one of us has one life. We only have one life. And if we're past focused and hurt focused, we're going to miss out on all the joy that we can create in our lives. And I think to forgive is to set ourselves free. And it's to relieve ourselves of a burden and to bring about that peace of mind. And it does take time. Like, we need to be gentle with ourselves. It does take time to work towards forgiving others and forgiving ourselves. And it may well involve processing emotional pain and understanding what caused it and thinking about what it would take to forgive. And for some people who get stuck, I really would encourage them to seek out a mental health professional who can provide a safe place to begin this process and to be able to reflect and to put aside.
When I was thinking about our episode, it made me think of my personal life. And one of the biggest challenges I had to face was to forgive a doctor. And this was with my first pregnancy, twins, and Haifa and Monir, and they were born very early. And after 11 days, Monir passed away. And I felt very angry towards the doctor because I felt there had been some mistakes or some things overlooked. And I specifically remember the moment I reached forgiveness. And it was really interesting that you mentioned time, because I think time is an important part of healing and forgiveness. And also I was fascinated that you talked about our choices. We have a choice. This is where we can choose what we focus on. And in that moment where I reached forgiveness, it was moving away from the death of my son and seeing this doctor as someone who gave me Haifa, our daughter. And so it was this huge shift from blame and anger and sadness to a place of gratitude. I was so grateful that he gave us this gift. So it's a process. But the reason I actually also shared this, because the moment I reached forgiveness is I was at a workshop. It was a spiritual parenting workshop, and we were picking out virtue cards. And it was, Haifa was 2 years at the time, and I picked up the virtue of forgiveness. And in that moment, I felt like this virtue was really speaking to me, and it was about all the anger I was holding on to. And what I found interesting also, going back to this virtues project and the virtues card, which was developed in the early 1990s by the Popovs, they also talk about the practice of forgiveness, including, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, including not allowing uncaring people the chance to hurt us. What do you think about that? Not forgiveness, including not allowing uncaring people the chance to hurt us.
I think if you ask 100 people, you'll probably get 100 different answers. I think, first of all, thinking about how much power do we give other people for our own spiritual well-being? And do we actually have a choice about that? So I think that the Baha'i writings talk very much about to be kind and to be loving to everybody and to overlook the faults of others, and also tell us very strongly that we are noble. So I wonder, when it says uncaring people, if we keep very focused on that, I think that it gives us almost a bit like spiritual armor to kind of be able to deflect a little bit and still hold very strongly to our worth and our value, no matter what others' actions are. So if we think about our experiences as opportunities for growth, then in every experience should be something that I can grow from, even if it's painful growth. You know, like you talked about with what happened with the birth of your twins, and then the subsequent, and then actually seeing gratitude, and then having to grow within to overcome. And I think that whilst we're in something, it may be painful, but what comes from it is growth and strength. So can some other person truly hurt us without our permission if we hold fast to the fact that in this experience is some opportunity for me to grow stronger in a spiritual quality? Even though at the time I'm not negating it won't be painful and it won't be a struggle, but growth comes from it. We build resiliency through overcoming challenge. And that's not to say that I wish challenge on anybody, but it is how we grow.
And it is part of life.
And it is part of life. And every time we respond ably, because you think about the word responsibility, to respond ably, we actually grow in capacity. And, you know, sometimes when my kids were little, you know, I might say to them, because we always need to be judging, especially when kids are little, we always need to be thinking about what is their capacity, and we want to stretch them but not break them. And there are sometimes situations where their interactions with another person are becoming, they need a break. And they send them positivity and love from a distance for a while. And so I guess my answer to your question is convoluted and long, and depending is kind of my answer. But I do still hold very strongly to struggle and challenge as part of life, and spiritual qualities are our true worth and value. And while we can be physically hurt, the spiritual gifts that we can grow out of overcoming struggle is our true wealth.
Thank you very much. You've shared some great tips on how we can move from hurt, anger, resentment to forgiveness, how we can reach that place of peace and healing. And it's been wonderful having this conversation. Thank you, Laura.
You're most welcome.
Thank you also to our listeners. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please do your part. Support us by sharing an episode with a friend and following Mind and Soul Matters on social media and on your preferred podcast app. You can also listen to episodes on our website, mindandsoulmatters.podbean.com. Look forward to your company next time on Mind and Soul Matters.